I stared at my reflection in the bathroom mirror, blood trickling from my mouth where I'd just pulled out my own crooked tooth with pliers. My hands were shaking. My 15-year-old face was pale, streaked with tears and sweat. And I was smiling. Because I remembered everything. I remembered dying at 32, alone in a studio apartment, my jaw so misaligned I could barely chew solid food anymore. I remembered the chronic migraines, the TMJ disorder that made every moment agony. I remembered scrolling through my sister's Instagram from my hospital bed, her perfect white teeth gleaming in every photo as she posed at charity galas with her rich husband, while I couldn't afford the surgery that might have saved my life. I remembered the moment my heart stopped, and my last thought, if only they'd taken me to that orthodontist appointment. Now I was back. Back to the day after they forgot. Again. My phone buzzed on the counter. A text from Mom. Picked up Melissa's dress for the spring formal. Looks stunning. Don't wait up, taking her to dinner at Le Bernardin to celebrate her early acceptance to Princeton. I looked down at the pliers in my bloody hand, at the rotting tooth I'd just extracted because it was causing an infection, and nobody would take me to the dentist. Then I looked back at the text. In my first life, I'd cried myself to sleep that night. I'd written in my diary about how much it hurt, how invisible I felt. I'd waited for them to notice, to apologize, to care. They never did. But this time, I wasn't going to wait. This time, I had something they could never imagine. I knew exactly how this story ended, and I was going to rewrite every single page. The memories crashed over me in waves during those first few days after I woke up at 15 again. I'd spend hours locked in my tiny bedroom, the one with the broken heating vent and the window that wouldn't close properly, reliving my future past. It started, as so many tragedies do, with small acts of negligence that snowballed into a lifetime of suffering. I was 8 years old when my baby teeth should have been examined. Mom had made the appointment, I remembered that, but then Melissa, 6 at the time, won some local beauty pageant, and suddenly she needed headshots, a portfolio, an agent. The orthodontist appointment was canceled. We'll reschedule, Mom had promised. We never did. By age 10, my permanent teeth had come in crooked. Not terribly so, just enough that kids at school started calling me snaggletooth and shark mouth. Just enough that I stopped smiling in pictures. Just enough that Mom would sigh and say, "We really should get that looked at," before turning her attention back to Melissa's latest audition or modeling gig. Melissa became the sun around which our entire family orbited. Mom had been a failed actress in her youth, and she'd poured every drop of her frustrated ambition into my younger sister, a successful hedge fund had. Manager just wrote the checks and nodded along, barely present in our lives except as a wallet with legs. I was the forgotten planet drifting in the cold darkness. The orthodontist appointment when I was 15, the one they'd just forgotten in this timeline, had been my last hope. I'd saved up birthday money and gift cards for 2 years to contribute to the cost. I'd researched offices that offered payment plans. I'd practically begged Mom to take me. Thursday at 3, she'd confirmed that Monday. I put it in my calendar and everything. Thursday came. I'd waited outside school watching other kids get picked up. 3 o'clock passed, then 4, then 5. Finally at 6, I'd walked the 4 miles home in the rain, my backpack growing heavier with each step, crying so hard I could barely see. I found Mom and Melissa in the kitchen, surrounded by shopping bags from Barney's and Saks. "Oh, honey, was that today?" Mom had said, barely glancing up from steaming the wrinkles out of a designer dress. Melissa got a call back for a national commercial. We had to go shopping for the audition outfit, you understand. I'd nodded, said it was fine, went to my room. That night, one of my back molars, already decaying because they'd also repeatedly canceled my dental cleanings, started to abscess. The infection spread. By the time they finally took me to an emergency dentist 3 days later, and only because I'd fainted at school, it was too late. The tooth had to be extracted. "Why didn't you say something sooner?" Dad had demanded, furious about the $3,000 emergency bill. I was 15 years old with a missing molar, increasingly crooked teeth, and the dawning realization that my own parents simply didn't see me as worth the investment. The pattern continued. Throughout high school, Melissa got acting coaches, dance lessons, a professional skincare routine, a personal trainer, a college counselor who cost $400 an hour. She got teeth whitening, Invisalign, when she complained about one slightly asymmetrical incisor, regular facials, and a nose job for her 17th birthday. I got nothing. Not because we couldn't afford it. Dad's hedge fund was wildly successful. We lived in a $4 million house in Westchester. Melissa's walk-in closet was bigger than my bedroom. They just didn't think I was worth it. "You're the smart one," Mom would say, as if that explained everything. "You'll get scholarships based on grades. Melissa needs every advantage in her industry." So I studied. I studied until my eyes burned, until I could barely sleep, because grades were the only currency I had. I got straight A's, won academic competitions, taught myself coding and 3 languages. I was accepted to MIT with a full scholarship. Mom missed my high school graduation because Melissa had a showcase in LA. At MIT, the dental problems got worse. My jaw misalignment caused headaches that made it hard to concentrate. I couldn't afford proper dental care. On my meager work-study salary, and when I asked my parents for help, Dad said, "You're an adult now, figure it out." Meanwhile, they paid for Melissa's apartment in Manhattan, her acting classes, her entire lifestyle while she pursued her dreams. I graduated with honors, got a good job at a tech startup, but my health kept deteriorating. The TMJ disorder developed. Eating became difficult, then painful, then nearly impossible. I had to switch to liquid diets. The migraines were constant. I couldn't sleep. My work performance suffered. I lost my job. By 30, I was on disability, living alone, barely surviving. Melissa, meanwhile, had landed a role on a hit Netflix series. She'd married the show's wealthy producer. Her life was a highlight reel of glamour and success. She came to visit me once during those final years, took one look at my apartment, at my gaunt face and twisted jaw, and said, "God, if you'd just taken care of yourself, maybe you wouldn't be in this situation." I died 2 years later, alone, in pain, forgotten. And now I was back. I spent the weekend in my room, planning. The rage that had fueled my first few hours after remembering was settling into something colder, sharper. I couldn't just lash out. I had to be smart. I knew things now. I knew that Melissa's acting career would eventually fizzle out. She'd get that Netflix role, yes, but she'd also develop a reputation as difficult to work with. And after the show ended, the offers would dry up. I knew that Mom's obsessive management would become suffocating, leading to a huge fight when Melissa turned 25. I knew that Dad's hedge fund would take a major hit in the 2020 market crash, though he'd recover. But most importantly, I knew my own potential. In my first life, crippled by pain and neglect, I'd still managed to graduate from MIT. I'd still shown flashes of brilliance before my health destroyed everything. This time, without that burden, what could I accomplish? First, I needed to fix my teeth, but not through them. Never through them again. I pulled up my laptop, the old slow one I'd bought myself with babysitting money, while Melissa had a top-of-the-line MacBook, and started researching. There was a university dental school in the city that offered orthodontic services at a fraction of normal cost. Students needed patients to learn on, supervised by experienced professors. The catch? I'd need to get there myself, attend appointments alone, and pay at least some fees up front. I opened my dresser drawer and pulled out the envelope where I'd been saving money. 2 years of birthday gifts from distant relatives who didn't know any better, of babysitting, of tutoring, $847. It would have to be enough to start. Monday morning, I went to school as usual, but during lunch, I walked to the payphone outside the principal's office and called the dental school. Yes, they had openings. Yes, they could see me for a consultation. Thursday at 4? Perfect, I said. I'll be there. I didn't tell my parents. I didn't ask permission. I simply forged Mom's signature on the consent forms. I was still a minor technically, but I knew from my previous life that they barely checked. And figured out the subway route from school. Thursday afternoon, I told my physics teacher I had a doctor's appointment and left at 3. The subway ride took 45 minutes. I'd never been on the train alone before. Mom considered the city too dangerous for me, though Melissa had been taking car services to auditions since she was 12. The dental school was old and institutional, all fluorescent lights and linoleum floors. Nothing like the sleek, spa-like office Melissa would visit for her Invisalign. But the student who examined me, supervised by a kind-faced professor, was thorough and professional. Severe overcrowding, crossbite, and early signs of malocclusion, the professor noted, studying my x-rays. How long has it been since your last orthodontic evaluation? Never had one, I said. His eyebrows shot up. You're 15? I nodded. He exchanged a look with his student. This should have been addressed years ago. You're experiencing pain? Headaches. Sometimes my jaw clicks. I'm not surprised. He sat down across from me, his expression serious. I'm going to be honest with you. This is going to be a long treatment, probably 3 years. We can do it, but it'll require commitment. Appointments every 4 weeks, strict oral hygiene, wearing your appliances as directed. I can do that. The cost for the full treatment, including extractions we'll need to do, and the braces themselves, will be around $2,500. We can set up a payment plan. I have $847 now, I interrupted. I can pay $100 a month after that. I'll get a weekend job. The professor studied me for a long moment. Where are your parents? Working, I lied smoothly. They know I'm here. They signed the consent forms. He didn't look entirely convinced, but he nodded slowly. All right, let's get you set up with a treatment plan. By the time I left the dental school 2 hours later, I had braces being fitted the following week, a payment plan that would require me to work my ass off, and a small secret victory blooming in my chest. I got home at 8 o'clock. The house was empty. There was a note on the kitchen counter. At Melissa's vocal coach session, then dinner, leftovers in the fridge. Mom. I ate cold pasta alone at the kitchen table, and I smiled with my crooked teeth. It was the last time I'd asked them for anything. Over the next few months, I became a ghost in my own family. I started working weekends at a local coffee shop, lying about my age to get the job. I babysat every weeknight I could. I tutored kids online. Every penny went into my dental treatment fund and a separate savings account I'd opened at a bank my parents never used. They barely noticed. Mom was consumed with managing. Melissa's burgeoning career, she'd landed a recurring role on a Disney Channel show, and the house became an endless parade of agents, managers, and photographers. Dad was busy with an upcoming merger. I'd leave before they woke up and get home after they'd gone to bed, and nobody asked where I'd been. The braces hurt at first, a constant ache that reminded me I was fixing what they'd broken through neglect. But I wore them like armor. At school, things were different too. I'd been a good student in my first life, but now with my memories of MIT and beyond, I was exceptional. I already knew the calculus we'd learned junior year, the physics, the chemistry. I breezed through exams, won every academic competition, started building a reputation among teachers as a genuine prodigy. But I kept my head down. I didn't draw attention. I was saving my energy for what mattered. In my first life, I'd only learned about my father's father, Grandpa Richard, after he died when I was 23. Mom had been estranged from him since before I was born, some old family drama she refused to discuss. I'd found out through a distant cousin at the funeral that he'd been asking about me for years, wanting to reconnect, but Mom had blocked every attempt. He'd died alone, wealthy and bitter, leaving his entire estate, nearly $20 million, to a cat shelter out of spite. Now, in this life, he was still alive. 78 years old, living in a penthouse on the Upper East Side, still running his commercial real estate empire. And I was going to find him. It took me 3 months to work up the courage. 3 months of research, of finding his address, of rehearsing what I'd say. I knew from my memories that Mom's estrangement had been over something petty. He'd disapproved of Dad, thought she was making a mistake marrying a man who valued money over character. Ironic, given Grandpa Richard's own wealth. But I'd learned that rich people often had complicated relationships with their money. One Saturday in February, I took the train into Manhattan and stood outside his building, a gleaming tower of glass and steel on Park Avenue. My braces were clearly visible now, silver brackets on display. I'd dressed in my nicest clothes, which was still just a plain sweater and jeans I'd bought at Target with my own money, and tried to tame my hair. The doorman looked at me skeptically when I asked for Richard Morrison. Is he expecting you? No, I admitted, but I'm his granddaughter, Grace Morrison. The skepticism deepened. Mr. Morrison's granddaughter is Melissa. I know, I'm the other one. Something in my voice must have convinced him because he picked up the phone and made a call. A brief conversation, one eyebrow raised in surprise, then he hung up. "Penthouse B, he says to come up." The elevator was mirrored on all sides. I watched my reflection multiply infinitely as I rose through the building, a thin 15-year-old with metal braces and determined eyes, about to bet everything on a man I'd never met. The elevator opened directly into a sprawling apartment with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Central Park, and there, standing in the foyer with a cane in one hand and an expression of pure shock, was Grandpa Richard. He looked older than his photos online, frailer, but his eyes were sharp and calculating, the same eyes I saw in my own mirror. "Grace?" His voice was rough with disuse or emotion. I couldn't tell which. "Hi, Grandpa," I said quietly. "I'm sorry to show up unannounced. I wasn't sure you'd take my call if I asked first." He stared at me for a long moment, then his face crumpled. "Come in, please, come in." I spent 4 hours in that apartment. I told him everything. Well, not the rebirth, but everything else. The years of neglect, the forgotten appointments, the way I'd become invisible in my own family. I showed him the payment plan for my braces, the bank statements showing my jobs, the report cards I'd never shown my parents because they never asked to see them. He listened without interrupting, his hands gripping his cane so tightly his knuckles turned white. "Your mother," he said finally, his voice shaking, "was always ambitious, always focused on image and status. It's why I didn't want her to marry your father. I saw that he'd enable her worst qualities. But I never imagined she'd treat her own daughter this way." "She doesn't see it as mistreatment," I said. "She sees Melissa as the investment with better returns. I'm just not worth the effort." "That's monstrous. That's my life." He was quiet for a long time, staring out at Central Park. Then he turned to me with an expression I'd never seen before, not in my entire first life or this one, someone looking at me like I mattered. "What do you want, Grace?" I'd prepared for this question. "Nothing you're not comfortable giving, but I want to know you, if you're willing. I want a relationship with my grandfather, and maybe, if things ever get bad at home, a place to go. I turn 18 in less than 3 years. I can wait it out. I just want to know I'm not completely alone." "Done," he said immediately. "More than done. I'll set up a trust for you right away." "No," I stopped him. "Not yet. If they find out about money, they'll swoop in and find a way to take it or control it. Wait until I'm 18. Right now, I just need you." He smiled then, sad and proud at once. "You're smart. God, you're smart. You get that from my side, you know. Your mother was always more cunning than intelligent." We talked until evening. He told me about his estrangement from Mom, about how he'd tried to stay in touch with us kids, but she'd moved and changed her number, about how he'd driven past our house once years ago and seen Melissa playing in the yard with Mom, but never me. "I thought maybe you were away at boarding school," he said. I told myself that was why I never saw you. "I was probably in my room," I said. "That's where I always am." When I finally left, he hugged me tight and made me promise to come back next Saturday, and the next, and every Saturday after that. I took the train home with tears streaming down my face, but they weren't sad tears. For the first time in 2 lifetimes, someone saw me, really saw me. The next 2 years were a study in contrasts. At home, I remained a ghost, but outside those walls, I was building an empire. Grandpa Richard became my mentor, my ally, my family in the ways that mattered. Every Saturday, I'd take the train into the city and spend the day with him. He taught me about real estate, about business, about how to read people and contracts and opportunities. He introduced me to his colleagues, his friends, people who looked at my braces and my Target clothes and saw past them to the mind underneath. Intelligence is the only true currency, he'd tell me. Everything else is just window dressing. For my 16th birthday, while my parents forgot entirely, they were in LA with Melissa for a screen test, Grandpa Richard took me to dinner at a restaurant I couldn't even pronounce the name of. He gave me a laptop, a top-of-the-line model that made my old one look like a toy, and a credit card tied to an account in my name. "For emergencies," he said, "or opportunities, your judgment." I used it to invest in Bitcoin. It was 2015, and I remembered from my first life that Bitcoin, trading at around $300 now, would hit nearly $20,000 by late 2017. I put $5,000 of my saved money and watched it grow. I also used my knowledge of the future in subtler ways. I entered essay competitions that I knew I'd win because I'd read the winning entries in my first life. I applied for scholarships that I knew were perfect fits. I built a portfolio of accomplishments that would make college admissions officers salivate. At home, Melissa was thriving. At 16, she'd landed the recurring Disney Channel role, and it led to a recording contract. She was releasing singles, doing tours, becoming a genuine teen star. Mom was living her vicarious dream, managing Melissa's career with an intensity that bordered on obsession. Dad just kept writing checks, and I kept being invisible. Until one Saturday in October of my junior year when everything shifted. I was at Grandpa Richard's apartment working on college applications when my phone rang. Mom. I stared at it in surprise. She never called me. I let it go to voicemail. She called again, then again. Finally, I answered. Hello? Grace, where are you? Her voice was sharp with panic. Library, studying. Why? Melissa's sick. She has the flu and we need someone to go to her showcase tonight. It's for the new Netflix series. Very important executives. Your father and I have to stay with her. I blinked. Okay. So, you need to go. Represent the family. It starts at 7 at the Tribeca Grand. Wear something nice. I don't have anything nice. Figure it out. This is important, Grace. Don't embarrass us. She hung up. I stared at my phone, a laugh bubbling up in my throat. After 2 years of being ignored, suddenly I was useful because Melissa couldn't perform her duties as the family show pony. Grandpa Richard had been listening. What was that about? I explained. He frowned. You're not going. Oh, I'm going, I said, an idea forming. But not the way they expect. He studied me, then slowly smiled. What do you need? 2 hours later, I walked into the Tribeca Grand Hotel wearing a dress that cost more than my parents had ever spent on me in a year. Grandpa Richard had taken me to a boutique where the saleswoman had looked at my braces and frizzy hair with barely concealed disdain until Grandpa Richard pulled out his black Amex and said, My granddaughter needs everything. The dress was midnight blue, sophisticated and age-appropriate. My hair had been professionally styled. I wore minimal makeup, just enough to look polished, and I smiled with my braces fully visible because I'd learned something over the past 2 years. Confidence mattered more than perfection. The showcase was already underway when I arrived. Melissa's agent, a shark-eyed woman named Patricia, who'd been to our house dozens of times and never once acknowledged my existence, was holding court with a group of executives near the bar. I walked up to the group and cleared my throat. Excuse me, Patricia? She turned, clearly ready to dismiss whoever was interrupting, then did a double take. Grace, what are you doing here? Mom asked me to attend in Melissa's place. She has the flu. Patricia's expression cycled through confusion, irritation, and calculation. I see. Well, thank you for coming, but this event is really for industry people. I understand, I said smoothly. I'll just stay long enough to pay respects to the executives Mom mentioned. Which ones are here for the Netflix series? One of the men in the group stepped forward. That would be me, David Chen, VP of Development. He extended his hand, looking amused. You're Melissa's sister? Grace Morrison. I shook his hand firmly the way Grandpa Richard had taught me. It's a pleasure to meet you. I'm sorry my sister couldn't be here, but she sends her regards and enthusiasm for the project. Well, you're certainly more articulate than most 16-year-olds I meet, he said with a genuine smile. What do you do, Grace? Are you pursuing acting as well? No, I'm focused on academics. I'm particularly interested in technology and entrepreneurship. I launched into a conversation about the tech industry, dropping names and insights that I'd gained both from my future knowledge and my time with Grandpa Richard. David Chen was fascinated. So were the other executives. For the next hour, I held court, answering questions, telling stories, demonstrating a level of intelligence and sophistication that none of Fanasa them expected from Melissa Morrison's sister. Patricia watched with increasing agitation. This wasn't the script. I was supposed to be the awkward, forgettable sibling who made an appearance and left. Instead, I was charming the room. Finally, around 9, I excused myself gracefully. David Chen handed me his business card. When you're applying to colleges, let me know. I sit on the advisory board for several business schools. I'd be happy to write a recommendation. Thank you, I said. That's very generous. As I left, I caught Patricia's eye. She looked furious. Good. I took the subway home, changed into my normal clothes, and was in my room by 10. Mom and Dad didn't get home until midnight. Neither of them came to check on me or ask how it went. But my phone buzzed with a text from David Chen. Tell your parents they're raising a remarkable young woman. Netflix would be lucky to work with anyone from your family. I screenshot it and saved it, just in case. Senior year arrived, and with it, the home stretch of my plan. My braces came off in September, 3 years exactly from when I'd started treatment. I stared at my reflection in the dental school bathroom and barely recognized myself. My teeth were perfect. Straight, white, beautiful. My smile transformed my entire face. The headaches had stopped months ago. My jaw no longer clicked. I felt healthy and strong and powerful in a way I'd never experienced in my first life. Gorgeous, the professor said, beaming with pride at his students' work. You should be very proud. You've been the most committed patient I've ever worked with. Thank you, I said, and I meant it. You gave me something I could never repay. Just promise me you'll keep smiling, he said. I promised, but I didn't smile at home. There was no point. They wouldn't notice anyway. College applications consumed my fall. I applied to every Ivy League school, plus MIT, Stanford, and a handful of elite liberal arts colleges. My grades were perfect. My test scores were perfect. My essays, informed by a lifetime of pain and a second chance at redemption, were extraordinary. Grandpa Richard wrote one of my recommendation letters. So did David Chen. So did 3 MIT professors I'd done summer research with, funded by Grandpa Richard's connections. My school counselor pulled me aside in November. Grace, I've been doing this for 20 years, and I've never seen an application package like yours. You're going to have your pick of schools. Thank you, Mrs. Patterson. I have to ask, though, your parents aren't involved in this process at all? I smiled my new, perfect smile. They're very busy with my sister's career. She frowned but didn't push. Well, you've done an exceptional job on your own. At home, Melissa was preparing for the premiere of her Netflix show. It was a teen drama, predictable but popular, and she'd landed the role of the protagonist's best friend. The fun, bubbly one who'd have all the best lines and comic relief moments. Mom was convinced it would launch Melissa into superstardom. They weren't wrong, at least not initially. The show would be a hit for 2 seasons. Melissa would become famous, recognizable, the target of fan fiction and stan Twitter. But I also remembered that by season 3, she'd be demanding more money and creative control, causing friction with producers. The show would be canceled after season 4, and Melissa's reputation as difficult would follow her for years. I wasn't going to prevent any of that. I was just going to be very, very far away when it happened. December arrived, and with it, early decision notifications. I'd applied early to MIT, my dream school, the place where I'd suffered through my first life, but where I'd also been happiest, back when I could still think clearly despite the pain. The email arrived at 5 p.m. on a Friday. I was working at the coffee shop, wiping down tables during a slow period, when my phone buzzed. Congratulations. It is with great pleasure that we inform you. I had to sit down. Even though I'd known, I'd lived this before, sort of, I'd gotten into MIT before, seeing it again, seeing that I'd succeeded on my own terms this time, made my eyes blur with tears. My manager noticed. You okay, Grace? I just got into MIT, I whispered. She screamed and hugged me. The other staff members came running. They'd all known I was waiting, and they were genuinely excited. These near strangers at my coffee shop job celebrated me more than my own family ever had. I took a photo of the email and sent it to Grandpa Richard. His response was immediate. I knew it. Dinner tomorrow. Bring your appetite. We're celebrating. Then I went home. It was 8 o'clock. Mom and Dad were in the living room with Melissa, watching the Netflix show premiere on the big screen. I could hear them cooing over her performance, pausing to rewatch scenes, laughing at her lines. I walked into the room. I got into MIT. They all looked up, startled by the interruption. What? Mom said. MIT, early decision, full scholarship. Oh, Mom said, and that's nice, honey. Congratulations. She turned back to the TV. Look, Melissa, this is the scene where I thought you'd want to know, I said quietly. Dad glanced over. MIT is good. Well done. Your mother and I always knew you'd do fine with college. Fine, not exceptional, not remarkable. Fine. Melissa didn't even acknowledge it. She was too busy watching herself on screen. I went to my room, closed the door, and didn't cry. I'd known this would be their reaction. I'd lived through it before in different ways, but knowing didn't make it hurt less. My phone buzzed. Grandpa Richard. Your parents? Didn't care, I typed back. Their loss, my gain, I love you, kiddo. It was the first time anyone had said those words to me in this entire life. I cried then, but they were good tears. The months between December and May, when I'd turn 18 and graduate, were both the longest and shortest of my life. I was counting down to freedom, but I also had to execute the final phases of my plan. Phase 1, financial independence. My Bitcoin investment had paid off spectacularly. The $5,000 I'd invested had grown to over $50,000. I sold half and diversified, following investment strategies I'd learned from Grandpa Richard. By graduation, I had nearly $100,000 in my private accounts. Phase 2, the trust. Grandpa Richard established it on my 18th birthday, transferring $5 million into an irrevocable trust with me as the sole beneficiary. I'd have access to the interest immediately and the principal when I turned 25. You've earned this, he said over birthday dinner, and I want to make sure you're taken care of, no matter what. Thank you, I whispered, for everything. Thank you for finding me, he said. These past 3 years have been the best of my life. You gave an old man a reason to keep going. Phase 3, the revelation. This was the part I'd been both dreading and anticipating. The moment when I'd show them exactly who I'd become and exactly what they'd lost by ignoring me. It came in April, at Melissa's 18th birthday party. Mom had rented out a venue in Manhattan, invited everyone important in the entertainment industry, spared no expense. Melissa wore a dress that cost $10,000. There was a red carpet, photographers, a gift table that looked like a jewelry store had exploded on it. I was invited, technically. Mom had sent me an email with the details. You should come, she'd written. It would be nice for Melissa to have her sister there. I decided to go, but on my terms. I wore another dress from my shopping trips with Grandpa Richard, emerald green, elegant, showing off my now perfect smile. My hair had grown out and I'd had it professionally styled. I looked older, sophisticated, beautiful in a way that didn't rely on youth or sex appeal, but on confidence and self-possession. I arrived late after the initial press line had died down, but when I walked in, heads turned. People whispered. Patricia, Melissa's agent, did a literal spit take. I walked up to my family. Mom was holding court with a group of producers, Melissa at her side in full princess mode, Dad hovering awkwardly with a drink. Hi, I said. Mom turned and her mouth fell open. Grace? Happy birthday, Melissa, I said to my sister. Melissa looked me up and down, clearly trying to figure out when her weird, invisible sister had turned into this. Thanks. You look different. I got my braces off, I said, smiling widely. 3 years of treatment. Worth every penny. Mom's face went pale. When did you... When I was 15. Remember that orthodontist appointment you forgot? I decided to handle it myself. By yourself? Dad interjected. How did you afford... I worked. 3 jobs sometimes. Paid for. It all myself. I smiled sweetly. I didn't want to burden you with another expense when you were so focused on Melissa's career. The group around us had gone quiet, sensing drama. Patricia jumped in, trying to smooth things over. Well, you look lovely, Grace. Are you still planning on MIT? Yes, I'll start in the fall. Full scholarship, like I mentioned. Full scholarship? One of the producers perked up. To MIT? That's impressive. Thank you. I'm excited about it. What will you study? Computer science and business. I'm particularly interested in tech startups and venture capital. I spent the next hour working the room, introducing myself to everyone important. These were people who'd been to our house dozens of times, but never knew I existed. Now they met Grace Morrison, not Melissa's sister, but Grace, a person in her own right, intelligent, articulate, bound for MIT, connected through Grandpa Richard to half the real estate moguls in the city. David Chen was there. He gave me a huge hug. Grace, I didn't know you'd be here. Have you made your college decision? MIT, early decision. Fantastic. They're lucky to have you. Listen, I'm involved in a tech accelerator program. If you're ever interested in doing a startup, let me know. We fund promising founders. I'll definitely take you up on that. Across the room, I could see my family watching this interaction. Mom looked confused and a little hurt. Dad looked surprised. Melissa looked threatened. Good. As the party wound down, Mom cornered me near the coat check. Grace, we need to talk. About what? About, everything. When did you become so... She gestured vaguely at me. So what, Mom? So polished, so connected? These people know you. Some of them, yes, I've been building relationships. With who? How? I smiled, and for the first time, I let her see the steel underneath. You were so focused on Melissa that you never noticed what I was doing. You never asked where I went on Saturdays. You never wondered how I paid for my dental work or my nice clothes or my college applications. You never cared enough to look. That's not fair, isn't it? Name one of my teachers, name one of my friends, name one thing I accomplished this year besides getting into MIT, which you found out about the day it happened. She opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again, nothing came out. I have to go, I said. I have plans tomorrow morning. Plans with who? Grandpa Richard. We have brunch every Sunday. Her face went white. You've been seeing my father? For 3 years, yes, every weekend. He's the family I wish I'd had all along. I walked out, leaving her standing there, and I felt nothing but satisfaction. Graduation came on a perfect June day. I sat with my class in the football stadium, wearing my cap and gown, preparing to give the valedictorian speech that would close this chapter of my life. My family was in the stands somewhere. Grandpa Richard was in the front row, having arrived 2 hours early to get a good seat. When they called my name to speak, I walked to the podium with my perfect smile and looked out at my classmates. I'm not going to tell you to follow your dreams, I began. I'm not going to say that hard work always pays off or that everything happens for a reason or any of the other platitudes we hear at graduations. Instead, I want to talk about being invisible. I spent most of my life invisible. Overlooked, forgotten. I'd be in a room and people would look through me like I was a ghost. For a long time, I thought that meant I didn't matter, that I was somehow less worthy than other people. But eventually I realized something. Being invisible is a choice other people make. They choose not to see you. They choose not to value you. And their choice says everything about them and nothing about you. So I made my own choice. I chose to see myself. I chose to value myself. I chose to invest in myself when no one else would. And now I'm standing here, valedictorian of our class, headed to MIT on a full scholarship, with opportunities I created through my own effort and vision. My advice to all of us is this: don't wait for other people to recognize your worth. Don't waste years hoping they'll finally notice you, value you, love you the way you deserve. See yourself, value yourself, build the life you want, regardless of who's watching. Because here's what I learned: the people who matter will see you. The people who don't aren't worth your time. Congratulations, class of 2018. Go build something remarkable. The applause was thunderous. My classmates stood. Teachers were crying. I looked at Grandpa Richard in the front row. He was on his feet, tears streaming down his face, clapping so hard his hands must have hurt. I didn't look for my parents. I didn't need to. After the ceremony, after I'd posed for photos and hugged friends and collected my awards, I found my family by the parking lot. Mom looked like she'd been crying. Dad looked uncomfortable. Melissa, who'd skipped her filming schedule to attend, looked bored. Grace, Mom started. That speech, was it about us? I finished. What do you think? You've been so angry at us, she said. I didn't realize. You didn't realize because you never asked. You never looked. We're still your family, Dad said. We're proud of you. I laughed, sharp and bitter. You're proud now that other people are impressed, now that I've achieved something public and undeniable. You're proud. But where were you for the past 18 years? That's not fair, Melissa interjected. Mom and Dad worked hard to give us a good life. They worked hard for you, I corrected. I was an afterthought, a ghost in my own house. You're being dramatic, Mom said. So we forgot some appointments. So we were busy with Melissa's career. That doesn't mean... It means everything, I cut her. Off. It means I don't need you anymore. I'm 18. I'm legally an adult. I have my own money, my own plans, my own life. Your own money? Dad frowned. From where? From working, from investing, from being resourceful. I smiled. And from Grandpa Richard, who's been more of a parent to me than either of you. Mom flinched. Grace, I'm moving to Boston in August. I'm not coming back for holidays. I'm not keeping in touch unless you give me a genuine reason to. You made your choice about which daughter mattered. Now I'm making mine about which family matters. I started walking toward Grandpa Richard's car where he was waiting for me. Grace, wait, Mom called. You can't just... We love you. I turned back. Do you? Can you name my favorite book? My best friend? What I want to do with my life? What I'm afraid of? What makes me happy? Silence. That's what I thought. I looked at Melissa. I hope your show is successful. I hope you get everything you want. But I hope you also remember this moment, because someday you're going to understand exactly what Mom's obsession with your career cost both of us. Then I walked away and didn't look back. MIT was everything I'd hoped for, and nothing like my first life. Without the constant pain, without the distraction of desperately trying to survive while my health deteriorated, I thrived. I double majored in computer science and business. I joined research labs. I started a tech consulting business on the side, leveraging my future knowledge to predict trends and advise startups. By sophomore year, I was making six figures. By junior year, I had venture capitalists calling me for advice. Grandpa Richard came to visit often. We'd have dinner in Harvard Square, and he'd tell me about his latest business deals while I told him about my research projects. He was my biggest cheerleader, my mentor, my family in every way that mattered. You remind me of myself at your age, he said once. Hungry, brilliant, refusing to let anyone tell you what you're worth. I learned from the best, I said. My parents tried to reach out a few times that first year. Cards for my birthday, which they got the date wrong on. Emails asking how school was going. A check for $5,000 that I returned uncashed with a note. I don't need your money. I needed your attention. Too late now. Mom showed up at my dorm once, unannounced. I was coming back from class, and there she was, sitting on a bench outside my building, looking older and smaller than I remembered. Grace, she said, standing, please just hear me out. What do you want, Mom? I want to apologize. I want to make things right. It's been a year. Why now? She looked down. Melissa's show got canceled. The network said she was too difficult to work with. She's been struggling to find new roles, and I realized that I put everything into her career and neglected you, and now I don't have a relationship with either of my daughters. And you think an apology fixes that? No, I think it's a start. She looked up at me with tears in her eyes. You were right. I failed you. I was so focused on Melissa, on reliving my own failed dreams through her, that I didn't see how remarkable you were, how strong and smart and capable, and I'm sorry. I'm so, so sorry. I stood there feeling nothing. In my first life, this apology would have meant everything. I'd have cried and hugged her and tried to rebuild what was broken. But this wasn't my first life, and I'd learned something important. Some things, once broken, can't be fixed, shouldn't be fixed. I appreciate the apology, I said finally. But it doesn't change anything. You had 18 years to see me, Mom. 18 years to choose me even once. You never did. And now you're here because Melissa's career imploded and you finally realized you bet on the wrong horse. It's not like that, isn't it? If Melissa's show had been renewed, if she was still on the path to superstardom, would you be here? Would you have ever noticed what you'd done to me? She didn't answer. That's what I thought. I started toward my building. I need to get to class. Have a safe trip back to New York. Grace, please. Goodbye, Mom. I didn't look back. I'd said goodbye to them the day I graduated high school, and I meant it. Junior year, I launched my first real startup. It was a platform for connecting skilled workers with project-based employment, and I designed it based on my knowledge of what the gig economy would need. David Chen's accelerator program gave us our seed funding. Within 6 months, we had 100,000 users. Within a year, we were valued at $10 million. The tech press loved the story. MIT student from privileged background who'd worked 3 jobs in high school, had paid for her own orthodontic treatment, was now revolutionizing how people found work. They didn't know the full story. I never told them about the neglect, the pain, the first life. But they knew enough to create a narrative of bootstrapped brilliance. Melissa's career, meanwhile, continued its downward spiral. She'd burned too many bridges, developed too much of a reputation. She was doing reality TV now. Melissa Morrison, Searching for Stardom, which mostly involved cameras following her to failed auditions and crying confessionals about how hard Hollywood was. Mom was still managing her, still convinced the next big break was just around the corner. Dad had quietly retired early, tired of funding the endless pursuit. They reached out when they saw the articles about my startup. Dad sent an email congratulating me and asking if I needed any family investment. I deleted it without responding. Grandpa Richard, though, was over the moon. "That's my girl," he crowed, showing the Forbes article to everyone at his country club. "My granddaughter, the entrepreneur." He was diagnosed with lung cancer in the spring of my senior year. Stage 4, the doctors gave him 6 months. I took the semester off to be with him. My company was stable enough, my coursework ahead enough that I could afford it, and there was nowhere else I wanted to be. We spent those 6 months talking about everything, about business and life and regrets, about my mother, his daughter, and where they'd gone wrong, about second chances and making the most of the time we had. "I wasted so many years being angry at your mother," he said one day, lying in his hospital bed with IV lines running into his arms. "I wish I'd tried harder to stay in your life." "You found me when it mattered," I said, holding his hand. "You saved me, Grandpa, in every way that counts." "No," he said firmly, "Asa. You saved yourself. I just got to witness it. That's my privilege." He died on a Tuesday in August, 2 weeks before I was supposed to return to MIT for my super senior year. I was with him at the end, holding his hand, telling him about my plans for the company, for my life. "So proud," he whispered, his last words. "So proud." The funeral was huge. He'd been an important man after all. Business leaders, politicians, celebrities. The church was packed. My parents came, Melissa came. They sat in the back looking uncomfortable and out of place. I sat in the front row and delivered the eulogy. "Richard Morrison was many things," I began. "A shrewd businessman, a generous philanthropist, a mentor to dozens of young entrepreneurs, but to me, he was simply Grandpa Richard. The person who saw me when I was invisible to everyone else. The person who taught me that worth isn't determined by other people's recognition, but by your own effort and integrity. He used to say that the greatest revenge is massive success, not because success hurts your enemies, but because it proves they were wrong about you, wrong to underestimate you, wrong to overlook you, wrong to think you needed them. Grandpa Richard taught me that lesson by example, and he taught me something else. Family isn't about blood. It's about who shows up, who invests in you, who believes in you even when you don't believe in yourself. He showed up, and that made all the difference. After the service, Mom approached me at the reception. "Grace, that was beautiful." "Thank you. I want you to know that I'm sorry for everything. I know I've said it before, but Mom." I cut her off gently. "I know you're sorry. I believe you. But sorry doesn't change the past. It doesn't give me back those 18 years. Is there any chance we can rebuild?" "I don't know," I said honestly. "Maybe someday, but not now. I'm still too angry. And you're still too wrapped up in Melissa's career to really be present." "That's not true, isn't it? Her reality show is struggling, and you're here trying to reconnect with a daughter who's successful. It's not a coincidence." She flinched. "That's a cruel thing to say." "But is it wrong?" She didn't answer. The will was read a week later. Grandpa Richard had left most of his estate, $75 million after taxes, to various charities and institutions. But he'd left a substantial portion to me, $20 million, along with his penthouse apartment and a collection of rare books he'd been curating for decades. The note he'd left with the bequest made me cry. "To Grace, who reminded me what it means to love unconditionally, use this to build your empire. Make them all remember your name." I graduated from MIT at 22 with 2 degrees, a successful startup valued at $50 million, and more money than I could spend in a lifetime. I moved into Grandpa Richard's penthouse, my penthouse now, and began the next phase of my life. The startup sold to a major tech company when I was 24 for $200 million. My share was $85 million. I used it to start a venture capital firm focused on funding women in tech, marginalized founders, people who'd been overlooked by traditional VCs. "I invest in the invisible," I told a reporter for TechCrunch. "The people others don't see. Because I know what they're capable of when someone finally gives them a chance." The firm took off. We had a reputation for finding diamonds in the rough, for seeing potential where others saw risk. Within 3 years, our portfolio companies were worth over $1 billion combined. I was profiled in Forbes, Fortune, Bloomberg. "The oracle of overlooked talent," one headline called me. "The VC who sees what others miss." I never mentioned my family in interviews. When reporters asked about my background, I said I'd come from privilege but learned the value of work early. I talked about Grandpa Richard often, about his mentorship and belief in me. But my parents and Melissa? They were footnotes, if that. Melissa's reality show was canceled after 2 seasons. She tried to transition into lifestyle influencing, but her following was lukewarm at best. She'd been too overexposed as a teenager, and now, in her mid-20s, she was struggling to find relevance. Mom had finally stepped back from managing her, broken by the realization that her golden goose had laid its last egg. She'd started therapy, someone told me, was trying to understand where she'd gone wrong. Dad had fully retired and spent most of his time golfing. They didn't reach out anymore. I think they finally understood that I meant what I'd said. We weren't family anymore. Not in any meaningful way. I turned 30 on a Thursday in March. I was hosting a dinner party in my penthouse, the same space where I'd first met Grandpa Richard, now decorated with my own art and furniture and memories. My friends from MIT were there, my business partners, the founders I'd funded who'd become genuine friends. The view of Central Park from the windows was spectacular in the evening light. I stood with a glass of champagne, looking out at the city, and thought about my first life. I'd died at 32, alone and in pain, forgotten by everyone who should have loved me. Now, at 30, I was healthy, wealthy, surrounded by people who valued me. I'd built an empire on my own terms. I'd proved every person who'd overlooked me wrong, and I'd never smiled at my family again. That was the key to the revenge, I realized. Not the money or the success, though those were satisfying. The real revenge was that they never got to see me truly happy. They never got to witness my perfect smile, the one they could have given me for a few $1,000s when I was 8 years old but chose not to. They'd had their chance to be part of my story. They'd chosen not to take it. And now they'd spend the rest of their lives knowing exactly what they'd lost. "Speech!" someone called out. My guests gathered around, smiling, waiting. I raised my glass. "Thank you all for being here. For those of you who don't know, today isn't just my 30th birthday. It's also the anniversary of the day I met my grandfather, Richard Morrison, 15 years ago." I glanced at the photo of him I kept on the mantle, the two of us at my MIT graduation, his arm around my shoulders, both of us beaming. He taught me something that changed my life. The people who matter will see you, and the people who don't see you don't matter. I smiled at my friends, my chosen family. "Thank you for seeing me. Thank you for mattering." The toast was met with cheers and clinking glasses. Someone started the music. The party continued late into the night, full of laughter and warmth and belonging. Around midnight, my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Hi, Grace. This is Melissa. I know it's your birthday. Mom told me. I wanted to say happy birthday and also, I'm sorry for every sorry thing. For not standing up for you. For being complicit in how they treated you. I was young and stupid and selfish. And I'm sorry. I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted you to know that I see it now. I see what they did to you. What I did to you, and I'm sorry." I read it twice. Thought about responding. Decided not to. Some apologies come too late. Some bridges, once burned, leave nothing but ash. I deleted the message and returned to my party, to my life, to my hard-won happiness. They'd forgotten that orthodontist appointment 15 years ago, they'd forgotten me for 18 years, and now I'd forgotten them. The cycle was complete. The revenge was perfect, and I was finally, truly free. Years passed. The venture capital firm grew. I became one of the youngest women to make the Midas list of top VCs. I was invited to speak at conferences, to advise startups, to sit on boards. My life was full and rich and meaningful. I dated occasionally, never seriously. I had trust issues, unsurprisingly. But I had friends, genuine connections, people who'd earned their place in my life through consistent care and respect. Melissa got married at 32 to a nice guy who worked in insurance. They had a modest wedding in Connecticut. I wasn't invited, but I heard about it through the social media posts of distant relatives. She'd given up on entertainment entirely and was working as a social media manager for a small marketing firm. Her Instagram, once full of red carpets and glamour shots, now featured motivational quotes and occasional throwback photos from her Disney Channel days. Mom and Dad looked old in the wedding photos. Tired. Smaller somehow. I felt nothing when I saw them. Not anger, not satisfaction, not even pity. Just nothing. They were strangers who happened to share my DNA. That's how I knew I'd won. When you stop caring, when they no longer have the power to hurt you or even register as important, that's when the victory is complete. I was 35 when I got a call from a lawyer. Dad had died, heart attack on the golf course, quick and painless. The funeral was in 2 days. I didn't go. I sent flowers with a card that said, "My condolences to the family." Professional, polite, distant. Mom called my office the day after the funeral. My assistant asked if I wanted to take it. I said no. She called again a week later, then a month later, then they stopped. 6 months after Dad died, I got a letter. Physical mail addressed in Mom's handwriting. My assistant brought it to me with a questioning look. I almost threw it away, but curiosity got the better of me. "Dear Grace," it began, "I don't expect you to respond to this. I don't even expect you to read it. But I need to write it anyway for my own peace of mind, if nothing else. Your father's death made me realize how much time I've wasted, how many opportunities I've squandered, How many relationships I've destroyed through my own selfishness and short-sightedness? I ruined you, Grace. I ruined Melissa too in different ways. I was so focused on my own failed dreams, so desperate to live vicariously through my children, that I forgot to actually be a mother. You were 8 years old when we missed that first orthodontist appointment. 8. And instead of rescheduling, I chose Melissa's beauty pageant. I chose wrong. And I kept choosing wrong for the next 10 years. I know you've built an incredible life without me. I've followed your career from a distance. I've read every article, watched every interview. You're everything I should have recognized you could be if I'd only paid attention. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I don't deserve it. I'm just asking you to know that I see you now. I see what I lost, and I'm sorry. I love you, Grace. I always have. I just didn't know how to show it in any way that mattered. I hope you're happy. You deserve to be. Mom. I read it 3 times. Then I folded it carefully and put it in my desk drawer. I didn't respond. There was nothing to say, but I kept the letter. Not because I forgave her or because I wanted to reconnect. I kept it because it was proof. Proof that I'd been right all along. Proof that they'd failed me, not the other way around. Proof that my revenge had worked exactly as planned. She saw me now, but she'd never see me smile again. I'm 43 now. My venture capital firm just closed its 5th fund at $750 million. I've funded over 200 companies, created thousands of jobs, helped hundreds of founders, especially women and minorities, achieve their dreams. I sit on the boards of 3 major tech companies. I've been featured in documentaries about Silicon Valley. I've given commencement speeches at MIT, Stanford, and Harvard. I never married, never had kids. My family is the community I've built. The founders I've mentored, the investors I've partnered with, the friends I've chosen. I think about my first life sometimes, about dying alone at 32 in pain, forgotten, about the sliding doors moment of that missed orthodontist appointment. Such a small thing, such a preventable tragedy. If they'd just taken me, just cared enough to remember, my first life would have been so different. But then I look at my second life, this life, and I realize maybe it had to happen this way. Maybe I needed to be forgotten to learn how to make myself unforgettable. Maybe I needed to be overlooked to learn how to see others who were overlooked. Maybe the revenge was never really about them. Maybe it was about becoming someone who could never be ignored again. Someone who mattered, not because of family or circumstances, but because of what I'd built with my own hands. Last month, I established the Richard Morrison Foundation for Neglected Youth. It provides free orthodontic care, medical treatment, and scholarship funding for kids whose families can't or won't invest in them. Kids like I was. The foundation is funded by $50 million from my personal fortune. It will help thousands of children, maybe more. Kids who feel invisible will be seen. Kids who feel worthless will be valued. Kids who've been forgotten will be remembered. At the press conference announcing the foundation, a reporter asked why I'd chosen this cause. I smiled, my perfect hard-won smile, and said, because I know what it's like to be overlooked, and I want to make sure no other child has to feel that way. The photo from that press conference ran in newspapers across the country, me smiling, confident, powerful. I wonder if my mother saw it. I wonder if she recognized the smile she could have given me but chose not to. I wonder if she understands finally that the greatest revenge isn't destruction. It's living so well that they become irrelevant. They forgot my orthodontist appointment. After Rebirth, they never saw my perfect smile again, and I've never been happier.